Hello, welcome to my channel Dharma Makes. Today's craft is a little birdhouse. This whole idea was inspired by this cute little wooden blank I found in a craft store. I won't be doing any major modifications to it, I will just be decorating it. But first of all, the necessary steps to make sure everything is fine is taking a nail file to all of the edges so that I can get rid of any potential splinters and sharp corners. It does help with the aesthetic, but also it prevents me from injuring myself as I work. With that done, it's base coat time. And as usual, I will be using a nice creamy acrylic paint in a darkish chocolate brown. Now this is constructed out of wood, so it's very absorbent. So I'm applying a generous coat and making sure that I get into every nook and cranny, especially under the roof and areas that will later not get as much attention. After it dried, I noticed how stark the interior was, so I'm just spraying a little bit of brown stain in there because it would be impossible to try and get my brush in there to paint all around. To decorate the walls of my little birdhouse, I wanted to use a pattern paper, and I just so happened to have just enough of this beautiful brownish pattern paper with sparkly flower design on it. It looks a little bit vintage, but it's really beautiful and a little bit shiny, and I just like it. So I'm just measuring and cutting down pieces of this paper to dress up the four sides of the birdhouse. The two sides were quite easy, but the back and front came with the problem that I didn't actually have a large enough piece. So I'm going to have to cobble it together from the strip of paper that I do have. And later on I'm going to find a way to hide those seams. Of course, in the front I had the additional challenge of dealing with the opening and that peg. So as you can see, I just made a hole and gradually made it bigger until it fit. I also marked the opening and cut it out so that I get that nice little round hole for the little bird. And did exactly the same for the roof, and just fit measuring and cutting here and there just to make it sure that it fits nicely. It still won't be perfect, but because of the additional things I will be adding, it will work just fine. And I was really happy because I was nervous at one point that the pattern paper wasn't going to be enough after all, but it was a success. I will be gluing on this pattern paper with some straight up PVA glue. Just making some last minute adjustments before it goes on permanently, sometimes trimming little bits here and there. And there we are, the walls are nicely dressed up. For the roof, I wanted to have dimensional shingles, and I had this little strip of actual wood veneer. I don't know from what species of wood it is, but it has all of these interesting kinks in the fiber of the wood that I think is just beautiful. So I measured to make rectangles that are exactly the same size, and I'm cutting them all out one by one. I'm also rounding two of the corners so that they have these nice curved edges. I'm sort of just freehanding them, trying to keep them all the same. And now the time has come to glue them on. I am using hot glue for this because I want it to catch, and I also don't mind the extra dimension and lift that it creates. At this point, I wasn't sure if I had enough roof tiles to cover the entire thing, so I'm alternating doing one side and then the next, instead of running the risk of covering one side completely and having the other one incomplete. At least if they are both filled in to the same level, I can use it as sort of a design element and come up with something else at the top. But I got quite lucky. I mostly managed to cover the roof all the way on both sides with just a small gap. The very top, I even had this longer piece that I could attach it and make it easier to fake those gaps. Before I move on, I realized I had some white edges from the pattern paper, so I pulled out some brown acrylic paint and just using a brush to kind of blend in those corners, and I ended up going around all of the edges. I like that sort of aged, distressed look anyway. I wanted to tint the roof a little bit, so I'm just putting on a coat of yellow shellac ink, and besides tinting, it actually works like a glaze on the wood veneer, which was raw, and it kind of made it a bit more shiny and finished. When that has dried, I am going to start adding on fake moss. And I'm using a smaller brush this time, and I am applying generous amounts of PVA glue and sprinkling on the moss mixture. I'm sort of tapping and pressing it on with my fingers, and I'm notably filling in those gaps on the roof, and I think that makes it look as if those parts of the roof still have shingles. They have just been completely overgrown by the moss. And also with the adding of the moss, I managed to hide the seams on the front and the back of the birdhouse where the pattern paper wasn't large enough. To secure all of this fake moss onto the object and make sure it never flakes, I'm first spritzing on some isopropyl alcohol to lower the surface tension, and then saturating it with a mix of PVA glue and water. This takes forever to dry, but I find it's a necessary step when working with anything that has loose particles in it, and I don't want flaking all around my house, so it's necessary. After I left it to dry overnight, I'm really happy with the results. So now it's time for the fun part. I have selected a variety of plastic plants and some other things that I'm going to decorate the little birdhouse with. Most of these plastic plants have been previously painted by me. They're sort of leftovers from other projects. And I'm also using up a little bit of leftover aquarium moss to put sort of like on two sides of the birdhouse so that it looks like a tiny grassy bump. And I'm going to be using low temperature hot glue to attach all these. I'm using the low temperature one because I am using my fingers and it can burn really badly. But the negative side to that is that it dries really quickly. So once I squirt the glue out, I need to be fast. I'm arranging these leaves in little clusters of 2 and 3, kind of varying their heights, and then I'm adding some of the viney plants on as well. I really like these. They are sort of delicate and small, and they don't really look plasticky after the paint job that I've given them previously. I'm also attaching some other things that look like they have little clusters of berries on them. They're actually just like plastic twigs with tiny styrofoam balls stuck to them and painted. To complete the little scene, I am using some grass stuffs. These come with adhesive pads, so I don't really need to use hot glue for them. I find the adhesive is really good on them. I've had things with the little grass stuffs on them for years and none of them have failed so far. So I trust it, at least from, the company that I bought them from. From the beginning, I knew I wanted to add a big flower on the roof. I had this quite nice yellow paper rose, but I wanted to accentuate the petals, so I'm using a little bit of orange ink and a sponge to bring out those edges. So of course a giant flower requires some leaves, so I'm using some painted silk leaves just to frame the flower. They may look a little bit out of proportion with everything else that's on the birdhouse, but the whole idea is that this is a tiny birdhouse and the flower is normal sized. I've added a couple of leaves on the other side as well, and I'm also adding more grass stuffs of varying sizes and textures. And that's it. I'm left with a cute little birdhouse that looks overgrown with all sorts of plants. I will be hanging this with some fishing line from the ceiling, and I actually already have a collection of other tiny birdhouses that it goes with. This is not a very practical, usable object, but I just have a fondness for birdhouses. I think they're really cute, and I like to populate them with tiny little plastic birds and different sorts of miniature toys. It just brings me joy. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please do let me know about your thoughts in the comments. If you like these sort of crafty videos, please consider visiting my channel. I have so much more content. I make all sorts of things from miniatures to sculptures to embroidery. And if you'd like to see what comes in the future, please consider subscribing to my channel. I publish new videos every week. Thank you for watching. I hope you're having a nice day. Bye.